Today, I'm going to be tantalising your earbuds, seducing your ears with facts and trivia about the person who has quickly became my favourite person in history, or should I say, herstory. It is none other than Cleopatra. Now, before we get into that, let me just explain a few things. Firstly, you are listening to Nightcap. If you've not heard this podcast before, this is the podcast where I retell stories of lies and legends, myth and murder, or in the world of drinks. Secondly, the format is changing just a little bit, just a tad, if you've listened to the previous episodes, and I am sure you have, because why wouldn't you? We got a little thing going on, me and you. This is our podcast. I tell stories, you listen to them, why wouldn't you have? My point is, I've been podcasting for quite a while now, probably about nine months or so, but during that whole time, I've only released 3 episodes. This is episode 4. Why the inconsistency, you may ask? Why do I release episodes so infrequently? And I'll tell you why. So the whole point of this podcast was that I was going to tell you stories in a very informal way. It was about as if me and you, we were just in a bar, and I was telling you a story, or we've had a night out, we've just finished, we've gone home, we pour ourselves a little drink, a little nightcap, and I give you a little story. Maybe you're listening while you're working, maybe you're listening to help you go sleep, whatever the case, it's just me telling you a little story that somehow has been influenced or is within the world of drinks. You don't have to know about drinks, you don't have to like drinks, nothing necessarily bartendery about it. It just so happens that, I work in the world of drinks and I do writing, and throughout my kind of research of drinks, I found all these interesting stories. Because for wherever you are in history, wherever cultural standpoint you're at, drinks have in some way, well, they kind of influence everything, right? There's all these interesting stories around drink, especially when people start getting drunk. So even if you don't drink, you can still kind of respect the stories, respect the history, and have a little good time hearing some stories. However, that didn't really go to plan when I was recording it. The whole idea is that I'll sit down, maybe once a night, I'll pour myself a little drink, and I'll record an episode. But I quickly figured out that just doesn't happen that way, does it? No, I've got to think about the story that I'm going to tell, and then I don't want to give you anything that's wrong. I want to make sure everything is kind of factually checked, so I've got to re-research it, and I've got to research the story, and I've got to find all these things, and then I've got to write basically a script on all the points, so I'll make sure I don't miss out any important details, or I don't say anything that's not in the story, and by the end of it, it becomes less me and you just sitting down, having a drink, telling a story, and it becomes me reading a script to you, which isn't interesting from any standpoint, and it's not really what the podcast was about. So now I'm changing it, and now I'm going back to the original, where I've just set up a microphone. I'm out of the bar, I'm now in my living room. I'm just going to have a little drink, and I'm just going to tell you from my perspective and kind of reel off however I do and however the episode ends up. That's how it ends up. Basically, I'm now winging it. No longer writing anything. I've got no script in front of me. I've got nothing. I'm just winging it and seeing how it's going to be. So things might not be factually correct. Things might not be as true as they should be. Who knows? I'm just going with the flow now. Hopefully you like it this way. I definitely prefer it this way. It saves me a lot of time. And it also means I can bring these episodes out much more consistently, right? Imagine that, 1 a week, right? That's what I'm going for now, 1 a week. You could be listening to my Mancunian voice telling you a story once every week. How brilliant is that? And in respect to that, this episode was never even going to be about Cleopatra. The whole idea of this episode was because I was thinking to myself, why is it that Egypt, as it currently stands, is such a non-drinking country? They barely ever drink. It's an Islamic country. It's 90% Muslims, and yet throughout history, Egypt constantly pops up as some of the original beer makers, the original wine makers. It's a country that was built on drinking. So this whole episode was going to be about why that is, and why, and what is that. But as I was researching it more and more, I kept reading things about Cleopatra. I ended up falling down a hole of researching Cleopatra, and it turns out that just pretty much every stage in her life was just a fascinating roller coaster of all sorts of emotion, love and sex, and I thought that is way better than me just riling on about religion and ancient Egypt. That's what I'm going to do instead. And however, even though some things on this podcast are changing, i.e. the format, some things will stay the same. As in, this is nightcap and we are going to have a drink. So whatever you're doing now, have a little break and pour yourself a drink. What have I got today? I have got Naked Malt Blended Scotch Whiskey. Not sponsored, just what I have in my bar. And that's what I'm going to be pouring today. Straight whiskey. Oof. Who am I? So already we have a mistake with winging the podcast, in which I got a bottle but no glass, and I ain't going to sit here drinking straight from the bottle no matter how much I want to. I don't think it's socially acceptable. Acceptable. So I'll have a glass now, and we can return to what I'm drinking. It is blended Scotch whiskey. Pour a bit out. Have a little taste. Delicious. Burns so good. Now I've got my drink. It's time to tell you a bit of a story. Oh, and before I move on to the story of Cleopatra, which is also interesting, I did touch on the fact that I was going to talk about the fact Egypt is now non-drinking and it was built on alcohol. I realised that you might actually be somewhat interested in that, so I should touch on it ever so slightly. So, I'm going to reel this off real quick. Why doesn't Egypt drink that much nowadays? It's because it is an Islamic country. 90% of the residents are Muslim, and for religious reasons, they do not drink. Although it is not illegal to drink in Egypt, you can still drink in Egypt. And if you've ever gone on holiday in Egypt, you've probably found yourself being very drunk in some kind of resort. But out in the non-touristy attractions, people don't really drink. Not illegal, but they don't do it. It's not illegal to drink on the street, but it is very much frowned upon and you can get arrested. And during the holy month of Ramadan, they do not sell any alcohol to residents of Egypt. As a foreigner with a foreign passport, you'll be able to buy alcohol, but if you live in Egypt, you wouldn't. Which is interesting because 10% of the residents of Egypt are actually Christian who do drink, but even they wouldn't be allowed to buy alcohol. Ain't that interesting? Now, when it comes to ancient Egypt, it was built on it because water was so unsafe to drink, but fermenting water into things like, i.e. beer, was safe to drink. So beer was safe to drink, water was not safe to drink. So everyone drank beer, whether you was a man, a woman, you didn't identify, or you was a child, you was drinking beer. That is how you would quench your thirst. That is how you would survive. Not with water, but with beer. Wine was drank a lot. Wine was made by the usual way, grapes, but they also drank a lot of fruit wine, things made from figs and pomegranates, but that was more of a luxury item. More for the higher class, things like royals would drink a lot of wine, where the peasants, they would just drink the beer. People also got paid in beer. Very interesting story, in fact, is that the pyramids, the workers who built the pyramids were paid in beer. They'll get paid between 3 and 4 litres of beer per day, which was their rations. They'll be drinking this throughout the day to kind of quench the thirst, and they'll also be drinking at the end of the day to relax, which I find really interesting. So if you're ever out and you're on a lunch break and you have a little lunchtime pint and someone turns their nose upon you, you just tell them that the people that built the pyramids, the things that still today, 4,500 years later, we don't fully understand how they was built. They're still standing strong. It is significant. It is the idol. It is the symbol of Egypt. They were built from drunks. So if they can do it, so can you. I also find it really interesting that if I go to my local pub now at about 4 PM, that will be full of construction workers, labourers, just having a cheeky pint. I find that really interesting because 5,000 years ago, people building the pyramids were finishing their day with a nice cold pint, and today, people finishing construction on the local scaffolding company and local scrapyard, they're also finishing the day with a little pint. Ain't that something? Lots change in life, but some things never change. And that is why Egypt was built on drinking, but they don't really drink today. Moving on, I've got my drink, we've covered the basics. it's time to reel off some interesting and fascinating facts about my favourite person in history, Cleopatra, as of today, when I found all this stuff out. So Cleopatra, if you don't know, she was the queen of Egypt, one of the last pharaohs. And if you don't know who she is, then where the hell have you been? Let's be real. Everyone's at least heard the name Cleopatra. And let me tell you, she is coming at you. Her rise to fame comes from her papa, her sweet departed father. Her father passed away and the throne was moved on to Cleopatra's brother. Now Cleopatra, she was a woman that wanted to get things done. You know, she had dreams, she had ambitions, she wanted to rule Egypt. She couldn't because she was a woman and that's a man's game, but nothing was going to stop her getting what she wanted. So she did the only thing she could do, and she married her brother. And she married her brother so she could co-rule Egypt. Now I know you might be thinking, that is disgusting, incest. But that wasn't uncommon for the day. Cleopatra's parents were actually siblings. She herself was a product of incest. Her father and her mother were both brother and sister. So it wasn't uncommon. Back in these days, royals would kind of keep it in the family a lot. You know what's one way to ensure a clean bloodline? It's just to keep it blood on blood. Marry your sister, marry your brother, have a few kids. The family lives on. The family name stays strong. The most disturbing part about this isn't that she married a brother. It's the fact that she was 18 at the time and her brother was 10. Now there'll be a lot of people hearing that thinking, oh, Cleopatra, she was the vision of beauty. She was like the original influencer. Well done, 10-year-old brother of Cleopatra. But let me tell you, if this was the other way around, if Cleopatra was a man, if the man was 18 and she was 10, different story altogether. So, incest and marrying a 10-year-old all came up in the first fact. Look at that, told you, this is going to be fascinating. Now, Cleopatra, this was all a game. She knew what she wanted and she knew a good way to get it. In these times, men had all the power, women had nothing but themselves. She decided to use herself to get what she wanted. She would use her assets. She would use this undefined beauty that she had to get what she wanted. So she had no real interest in her brother. This was all a ploy to kind of rule Egypt, which her brother caught on, and he turned to her and he said, you know what, we're done, we're finished, you're banished. He banished her, and she was out on the streets of Egypt. Now, at the time, Julius Caesar, the Roman general, was pretty much taking over the world. He's took over like the majority of the Mediterranean. He's taken over all of Egypt. He's wanting to get involved. Did I say Egypt? I meant Europe. He's took over Europe, the Mediterranean. He's wanting to get involved with Egypt. So he wants to align himself with the king, who don't want anything to do with it. But Cleopatra, she sees a way in here. Caesar is another powerful man that she can seduce. So what she does is she wraps herself in a rug, or she gets someone to wrap herself in a rug. Don't know how you'd wrap yourself in a rug. I suppose if you lie on it, you wrap it round you, you roll. But then how would you move? Probably not possible. Okay, so she gets someone to roll her in a rug. She then gets that rug delivered to Caesar's private quarters, kind of Trojan horse style. And then when he unravels the rug, she pops out and she's dressed in all her finery, all her gold. Just imagine the look on Caesar's face, you know, oh, I've got a rug deliverer. Who's delivering me a rug? And then out pops this kind of young Cleopatra, fully draped in gold. And she gets right to work seducing him and aligns this kind of thing where she says, hey, my brother don't want to be involved with you, but maybe me and you can have a thing going and you can help me reclaim the throne. And that is exactly what he does. Fights pursue, and before you know it, her brother dead. He drowns in the Nile, but then he has someone take his place. It's Cleopatra's other brother. Yeah, she's got siblings. So what does she do? Well, she moves on, she seduces her other brother and marries him as well. Keeps it once again in the family. And I know you're wondering, How old is she now? How old is her brother? She is 22 years old and her brother is 12, so an even bigger age gap. Right, she's just going for anyone. She don't care who they are. Hide your sons, hide your daughters, hide your husbands, because Cleopatra is coming for you. However, this time she's not taking any chances and she straight up poisons her brother. That's right. That is family murder. Look, we're like, 5 minutes into this story and we've got 2 cases of incest, 1 case of cheating, because she did cheat on her brother with Caesar, and we've got murder. Fascinating. What did I tell you? Didn't lie. I might have to have a scotch break. So, we're at the point in the story where Cleopatra is now happily reigning alongside Caesar, and they're just having a blast, they're just doing their own thing, they're having fun. Don't even worry about them. There is someone in the wings waiting, and I forget the name, because like I said, I ain't got any of this stuff written down. Octavius? Let's just call it the new Roman invader, someone else who wants to take over the Roman Empire, and they're doing, so far, a pretty good job. It's a constant battle between this Octavius guy and Caesar, which are both great names, regardless. Speaking of, I do really like the name Cleopatra, and the more I say it now, the more I like it. It's a good name. I suppose you can shorten it to Cleo. That's a good name, Cleo, Cleopatra. Oh, good name. Anyway, I'm going off piece. The fact is, in today's world, everyone sees Cleopatra as this slut, right? And as proven so far, she has been quite promiscuous. Well, lots of people are promiscuous, especially in those times. That doesn't deem you the name of a slut, you know. Oof, what a title. So why is this? Now, this is smear campaigns by these Roman invaders. This Octavius guy sets up all these smear campaigns to discredit Cleopatra, because all of Egypt, they love Cleopatra. She doesn't just use her looks to seduce men, but she realizes the power of looks, which is no different from today. You know, a man, he might wear a nice suit to look more important, to look like he means something more than maybe he does, to look like he's got more money. He might wear a nice watch, he might drive a nice car, or to kind of flaunt this wealthy image that maybe he doesn't even have. A woman might do the same thing. It's the same, we see this on social media all the time. Guys standing in a certain light to make himself look ripped, girls using filters, or, you know, that little thing where you pull your pants up a little bit just to make your waistline look more cinched. Cleopatra was the originator of this. She used to use her beauty to seduce people's thoughts of her. See, one of the greatest goddesses in ancient Egypt who people worship more than anyone was a goddess named Isis, and Cleopatra purposely made herself look like Isis any time she did any public appearances. So the people of Egypt just loved her, you know. This is this look of Cleopatra that we see and know, with the black hair and the beads and the gold kind of necklaces and all these gold frocks. Do you call them frocks? Whatever it is she's wearing, that specific look. You know what you see on like Halloween when people can't think of any Halloween costumes to wear, so they just wear a Cleopatra outfit? That was the look she would use in public to make herself look like Isis. So all the people of Egypt used to look at her not just as a queen, but as a goddess. They used to say, oh look, it's Isis re-embodied in the queen Cleopatra. They just absolutely loved her. So the Roman invaders knew that if they was going to take over Caesar, they're going to have to discredit Cleopatra. The last thing they want is Romans liking Cleopatra. So they would spread all this propaganda about, watch out, Cleopatra, she's going to seduce you. If you're a man, if you've got wealth, if you've got power. They painted this image that she just goes around using these fantastic assets, let's call them, of hers to seduce men. She was this seductive temptress. And the thing is, that propaganda, that is stuck around today. That's what people today still think about Cleopatra. It's crazy. So they're doing that anyway. They're discrediting Cleopatra. Cleo... Look at me acting like I know her, acting like we're best mates. Cleo and old Caesar. Might as well call him Jules. Cleo and Jules, they're in Rome. Caesar gets invited to this kind of gladiators game or whatever they used to do then, and he gets violently assassinated. I mean, like, brutally assassinated. So they invite him to this game, and there's like 40 or 50 men waiting in the wings, and they just start like stabbing him up. He doesn't just get stabbed once to death, he gets like stabbed to death like 25 times. He was stabbed, trampled down, absolutely brutally assassinated. Cleopatra, she runs right back home. She's on the run home. She don't know what to do now. She's alone. She needs someone new to give her some power. Well, it just so happens that the person who's going to take over Caesar is a man called Mark Antony. Now, Mark, who also happens to be a relation of Caesar. Don't know how. I think it's brothers or his sisters, maybe it's his cousin or something. Anyway, he's taking Caesar's place. Cleopatra's like, I must seduce him. I've got it. I've got this in the bag. Or I've got this in the rug. I know how to do this. So, what she does, she starts thinking, okay, well, what does Mark like? What's Mark? And Mark Antony, he's really into, like, Greek culture. He just loves the Greek. And the Greek, they love their own gods. They have their own gods. The most powerful of which, the most beautiful of which, is Aphrodite. So what she does is she arranges a meeting with Mark where she rows up the river, or she gets someone to row up in this gold boat with silver oars, and she's dressed head to toe just like the embodiment of Aphrodite, the Greek goddess. And she's getting rowed up, and then she kind of strolls off the boat once again, draped in gold and wealth, looking all Aphrodite and shit. She's looking good. She sets herself up under a canopy. She has people fanning her, feeding her grapes. She has these girls running round dressed as nymphs. And the whole thing is just like a homage to Greece and Greek mythology. And Mark, he's definitely into this, and he says to her, hey, why don't you come have a dinner with me, maybe? And she's like, no, I don't think so. Maybe you should come have a dinner with me. Where she once again shows off all this wealth, dressed like Aphrodite, and he just falls head over heels. Once again, she's got it in the bag. And this is what I mean when I think she's fascinating, because I think she's really intelligent. There's this whole image of her being this promiscuous woman who uses her assets to seduce men, which she did. If you can do that, why not? This is a time where women had nothing except their assets. So if she can use her beauty to seduce power, why not do it? I think what people forget is she could speak like 7 different languages during a time with no internet. I, at a touch of a button, can learn any language I want, and yet I barely know one. She spoke 7 languages. She was really, really an intelligent woman. So what if she used the looks to seduce men? So what if she was a little bit promiscuous? It got what she wanted. It worked. It was intelligent. I respect it. I like it. And it wasn't all about power. It said that her and Mark actually did love each other. They were actually a solid couple. And it's with them that they kind of have all this fun. And like I said, this is a podcast about stories influenced by drinks. Cleopatra so far has not really been influenced by drinks, but that's where it changes. Because Cleopatra did have some interesting times surrounding drinks, especially with Mark Antony, and that is what we're going to talk about now, because I've got 3 interesting stories about Cleopatra which are drink related, and that is what we're going to talk about now. So it seems though it's only 3 stories and it's going to take up a short amount of this podcast. We should probably have some kind of bigging up of the stories. We should have some kind of intro. So let's roll some kind of intro. Let's try something. How about this? How about 3 drinking stories about Cleopatra. How was that? Not that good? No, it didn't really big it up. I got it. How about this one? Drink like an Egyptian. Drink like an Egyptian with Cleopatra. Story 1. Cleopatra used to bathe in wine. Why did she bathe in wine? She thought that it moisturised the body. And she didn't just bathe in wine, she also bathed in donkey's milk, because she thought that had beauty benefits as well. Interesting, right? Story 2. Cleopatra and Mark Antony had a secret drinking club that they had together. Ain't that cute? Oh, little drinking club, so romantic. The name of it escapes me, so let me Google that, see what it was. It was called the Inimitable Livers, which was widely understood to have been a group of dedicated to the cult of the mystic god of Dionysus. Basically, it was just a drinking club. They used to get together, have a load of drinks, have a bit of fun, have really lavish wealth drinking and dining experiences. Cleopatra would even go out to the towns in disguise and they'll play pranks on the people that lived in the towns. Like, they really got on it. They had like a little couples outing like once a week. They were loving it. Story 3. My favourite of the 3 stories is that of the Pearl of Cleopatra, or as I'm calling it, the most expensive cocktail in the world. So one time, as legend states, Cleopatra bet Mark Antony that she could throw a more expensive dinner party than he could. He kindly accepted the bet, and she threw her dinner party first, to which they sat down together. She asked for a goblet of vinegar. Once the goblet arrived, she seductively reached up to her earlobe and plucked a large pearl earring. She dropped the pearl into the goblet of vinegar. The pearl dissolved. She drank the whole thing, threw it back, shotted it down in one, and said, "I'm done." That pearl was worth, in today's money, just to put this in perspective, today's money, that would have been worth about $10 million American. The pearl earrings that Cleopatra had was some of the biggest pearls known to man. They was the most expensive pearls in the world, and she put one right out, dropped it in vinegar. Now that story has been disputed by many. First of all, how quick does a pearl dissolve in vinegar? There's this whole debate. Maybe she crushed the pearl, dropped it in the vinegar and had it like that. Maybe it didn't dissolve. How long did it take to dissolve? This was meant to be a whole one swift, romantic, kind of seductive movement. Ain't no pearl dissolving in vinegar that quick, which is why people say maybe she crushed it up and put it in. Who knows? The story might be fake. It probably is fake, but it's an interesting story nevertheless, and it's the most expensive cocktail in the world. And I like cocktails, so I like that story. And there we have the 3 interesting drinking stories of Cleopatra. Now those 2 lived quite the cute life together, like really they did. I truly believe she probably did love him, looking at all the trivia there, looking at all the little facts. So her and Mark really did have some good times together, and they ruled and they had fun, and they, as far as I'm concerned, they were good rulers, as far as I know anyway. It did come to quite the bitter end. Remember that Octavius guy that I was talking about before? The one that sounds like a Transformer? The one whose name I'm probably getting wrong? Well, he was fast on the approach, and he was taking over Egypt with quite the force, so much so that he took over the city of Alexandria, which was the capital and where Cleopatra resided. So she ran in hiding. She knew it was over. She had a spy on the inside who told her that that Octavius was going to take her back to Rome and parade her down the street. You know, like something out of Game of Thrones, remember, with the whole shame. Like, he was going to do that with her. And she was like, well, I'm not having that. So what did she do? She committed suicide. Now, this is Cleopatra, right? She does everything in style. So how does she commit suicide? She gets a servant to smuggle her in a snake. This is called like the apt or something, or a type of Egyptian cobra. It's poisonous. She gets it to bite her. As the story goes, she either got it to bite her on the arm or on her bare breast. One or the other, maybe even both. I think there's a Shakespeare play, perhaps, about Mark and Cleopatra, and in the play, the snake is seen to bite both the arm and the titty. I don't know, I mean, why would you get it to bite your titty anyway, right? You could commit suicide. Well, I suppose it's right there, you know, it's near your heart, and if it's on the arm, you could just survive it, you could just chop your arm off. It's not important to the story. The point is, she had the snake bite her, the snake was poisonous, and she died. And that was the end of Cleopatra. Now, once Mark got the word that she killed herself, he too decided to kill himself. He got his servant to stab him with his sword. The servant said, no, I'm not going to do it. And instead, he killed himself. So then Mark Anthony was like, oh, what the fuck, man? I wanted you to kill me and you killed yourself. So he took the sword and then he killed himself as well. So it really is some Romeo and Juliet shit that happened. And it is said that they was also buried together. So he was her true lover and they end up being buried together. What's more romantic than that? How cute. And that is just some of the fascinating stories surrounding Cleopatra, which I found out, which is very interesting. She really was an intelligent woman, and I think if you put her in perspective today, it's like she was the Kim Kardashian of her day. Now hear me out, right? Because Kim Kardashian has built this whole reputation behind being this influential woman. It's all about looks, she's got this very defined look. It really is her image, just like Cleopatra. She knew how to use the look. Kim Kardashian would use her looks to make her way in life, to set up the show, to set up all this kind of influential power, to take over the world. And that's exactly what Cleopatra did. But behind it all, there's a really intelligent woman there. Intelligence is all thought out. When you watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians and you see Kim acting this kind of fool with all these unrelatable problems, you can't help but talk about it. You can't help to go right to social media, do your little tweet, do a little Facebook status, a little Instagram, and talking about it. And what that's doing is that's getting everybody interested. That's talking about it. It's like what they say, even bad press is good press, right? And I think the two are very similar, and the reason I'm really doing it is because I've also just started watching the new Kardashians, so I've got Kardashians on the mind, but I really do think Cleopatra is the Kim Kardashian of the BC era, and you can quote me on that. Furthermore, I find it really interesting that there are these two perceptions of Cleopatra. First, being the ruler of Egypt who spoke 7 languages and who the people absolutely loved. And the other one is this propaganda that she was this slut, that she used to be promiscuous and she would sleep with guys and she was this whole thing. And yet, the one that survived today is the one that she was promiscuous. That says a lot about how we treat women of history. Doesn't it just? Absolute sexism. Furthermore, I found out something else that was really interesting, that Cleopatra might not have even looked that attractive by modern day standards nor Egyptian standards. There's depictions of her with coins and there's been kind of 3D renders made up of her where it shows that she had this like really big kind of bulbous nose and this pointy chin. She kind of looked pretty witch-like, and the fact that everyone kind of thought she was beautiful and thought she was the most beautiful woman ever was just because she would drape herself in all this gold, and it's kind of distraction, like the whole peacock thing of wear something really over the top and people will think that is you kind of thing, it's like she was the original catfish. One day she looked the spitting image of Aphrodite, she wake up the next morning, she looked like a witch, which was very much beyond her time, really. I mean, that's like a today thing. You can make yourself look like anyone today, and that's what you do, but way back in the day, that was unheard of. She was the originator of so much. So she was the originator of slut-shaming, the originator of catfishing, the originator of seducing men to get what she wants. What's not to respect there? You've got to respect that. But I digress. So that's the story of Cleopatra, my most favourite woman in history, as of yesterday, when I looked into all this stuff and when I got sucked down this rabbit hole of Cleopatra trivia. I'm sure there's much more interesting trivia out there too. Well, side note, if you want to learn more about Cleopatra, there is this song by CBBC Horrible History. So Horrible History is the show, it's for children, it's on CBBC's. They have a song about Cleopatra, and when I was trying to come up with all the kind of little information bits I wanted to learn a bit, I listened to that song, and it pretty much tells you everything you need to know with a catchy jingle. Honestly, it's amazing. Have a listen. It's both funny and educational. It's great. I really should have released this episode on National Women's Month. That's the thing, right? Women's Month. It's definitely a thing. I should have released it then, but instead, releasing it now. So if you have any women that you think are historical geniuses, please let me know, have a conversation with me. We can chat about influential women of modern and past times. Reach out to me. You can always follow me on Instagram at themindful_mixologist. Don't forget to check out Smart Blend if you're not already on it. That is smartblend.co.uk, not .com. smartblend.co.uk. If you're still listening to this podcast at this point, it means you have made it through, which is great, because I make these podcast episodes for no one except you. These are all made for you. You are who I make it for. Not everyone else, not the other person, just you. So if you listen to it this far, it means that I did a good job. If not by entertaining you for 30 minutes, then at least by distracting you and just giving you a little bit of background noise. So please do follow and please check out other episodes. Like I said, episodes are going to be dropping weekly now. I would muchly appreciate that. And feel free to reach out to me anytime and we can speak about Egypt or drinks or whatever we may talk about in future episodes. Next episode should drop, I want to say, next Thursday. I'm going to aim for, like I said, weekly. Going forward, weekly. Unless I edit this and I think it's a pile of bollocks because I didn't write anything down. If I enjoy it, weekly. So look out. I think I've already got my idea for next week, so I'm going to try and get it on Thursday. I think my idea is going to be, a spoiler alert, Pirates. I've just finished binge watching Pirates of the Caribbean. Obviously, there's all this kind of Johnny Depp controversial court case going on in the news. I'm trying to keep out of it as much as possible. I say I'm trying to keep out of it like I know him, like I'm going to get involved, like I'm going to get on national TV. I just mean, personally, I'm waiting to see what happens. But it made me think of Pirates of the Caribbean, and I love Pirates of the Caribbean, and I've not watched them in a long time. So I thought, let's rewatch the whole of the series, and that's what I've been doing, and having a bloody good time doing it. And now my mind is just full of all things boats. Anything that's not reserved for Cleopatra is now reserved for boats and pirates. So I think next week I'm going to talk about pirates. There's a lot of facts there, especially in the whole the rum swigging pirate culture, which is interesting and relates to drinks because hey, yo ho and a bottle of rum. So I might talk about pirates and the real life pirates. That'll be good. What do you think of that? Do let me know. And hey, if you've got any ideas of stories you want to hear, drop them my way, because I do have a big list. I'll just add it to it and then shuffle them up and find whichever one I want to talk about. And with that being said, I should probably leave now. My whiskey's going dry. I'm going to top that up. It is currently 35 minutes past 12. That is at night, not in the afternoon. So I really should leave, have one more little nightcap, and then get myself off to bed for some sleep because I have a busy day tomorrow. So once again, my name has been Cameron. I've been your host and you have been you, the lovely listener. Let's do this again sometime. Till next time, goodbye.